I thought that by exercise, I should be in a better place. And I wasn't. I wasn't. I look back at the results of 10 years ago when my A1C levels were already at 5.7. I was eating healthy. I was exercising. I started realizing, hang on, but that's been 10 years. I was initially scared that there would be some deeper things, cancer or anything like that, that it could be found. Before, I was against any type of medication. Like, I'm too young to be already in medication. There's certain medications that really improve your lifestyle and your biometrics in such a way that it is a no-brainer to do it.
It's a tool in the toolkit. Use it. So you got 7 pounds of fat off of you. At the same time, though, you were able to gain almost 2 pounds of lean mass.
What this journey has taught me, one, this is a lot more complex than people think. This is a journey about learning your own engine.
The knowledge you've gained, this is part of being able to really be your own best health advocate. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Optispan podcast. This is the second in our Optispan Success Story Series. I'm really pleased to have Carlos Pinto in the studio today. Carlos, you've been a client with Optispan since I think the middle of 2004. So you're one of our early trailblazers, so to speak. And so, what we want to do today is just kind of hear about your personal experience, your health span journey. This really isn't about the Optispan programs, although we'll touch on that. But the hope is that we can just give people, experiences that you've had that resonate with them, that might fit what people are going through now, to learn about, what can happen when you actually lean in and take control of your own health. So again, thank you for joining me. It's a real pleasure to have you here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So your background is in technology. You've been an executive. You were at Leafly for a while, but you've had a series of positions where you've been in executive leadership. I think probably many of our viewers can relate to that sort of a lifestyle. Maybe you can just talk a little bit about, where you were with respect to your personal health, how much you had really thought about it, and how that was impacted by your career experience before you came to Optispan.
Well, let me start. When you graduate from college, the next big thing for you is your job, your career, how that's going to develop. And then you start just moving away from college and high school when you were active, part of exercise and being part of sports. It was a big piece of me. Then that moved away with my career. And I started my career. And then as you move up into different roles and bigger opportunities, all of a sudden, what you realize is that the health part is not as important as your professional career. And that started creeping up all the way from when I was in my late 20s, all the way through my mid 30s, in a way that obviously my career was, and it's still very, very important, but at the same token, health was never a part of it. And then you start getting some little fire alarms that you start just hearing in the background, and you never really pay too much attention until something stops you on its tracks and you realize, okay, this is something I need to pay attention to.
And for you, did you have those experiences where you felt like all of a sudden, oh my God, I'm getting old? I mean, that's sort of the experience some of us have.
For mine, it was even more shocking because for me, it was through mental health. So I had an episode of a panic attack while I was on a business trip, and it was really, really powerful. And that's when my journey started with, okay, this is my mental health, and then how I move into actually my physical health and the sense of how I start connecting the dots from what was happening to what was the actual root of it.
Mm-hmm. And we were talking before, you told me that you had an experience with a health program several years ago. We don't have to name the program, but maybe you can just kind of take us through, like, what was that program about? What was your experience there? What were the good aspects? What maybe didn't stick for you? And I think that'll lead into, where you're at today.
Sure. Look, one thing that is really interesting is that in our careers, we look at data. We look at everything around whatever your job is. You look at information, data, insights, then you create some hypotheses. You try different things. When it comes to health, my understanding was I just go and sign up for a program. I'm going to start losing weight, talk to the doc, and see where I landed.
And was this a medical program or a wellness program?
Yeah,
was there a doctor involved?
It was both, yeah.
Okay.
So essentially you went through, do initial testing, then you work with a physical trainer and you work with a nutritionist. So it was a well-established program. But what it really didn't work out for me in the sense that the number one thing that I wanted to get out of it is to get learning and understanding around anything around your cardiovascular health, your metabolic health, anything that entails in what touches and what doesn't. So for me, it was just more about dropping weight, exercising
That's
more.
kind of the emphasis of the program at that
was
point.
it.
Yeah.
And, it's been 10, 12 years since then, and realizing that was only a very, very small portion of what it really
And you had
entailed.
success, right? You did manage to lose weight in that program.
Yeah, and I managed to just get exercise back into my life. So throughout the last 10 years, you feel that, okay, I'm coasting well because, I'm not terribly overweight. I'm exercising, so I should be okay until you go through this program.
Yeah. Did you feel like it was that you had sustained it though since that experience?
Yes and no, because the pandemic came about and working remotely out of your home, it was a real punch. And then what it took me away is that after the pandemic, I really never really shook it off in the sense like I need to get back into my lifestyle. And then the combination of those two things really made me end up here.
Yeah. And so when you started at Optispan, what was sort of your frame of mind coming in? I mean, did you think, I'm in pretty good shape. I just want to get a tune-up, kind of learn where to go? Or were you like, oh my God, I'm broken. I need some help? Like, where were you?
I was already at that place.
Oh, you were? Okay.
I really wanted to understand. Obviously, I've heard about you and the program and the science behind it. So I really wanted to do that level of depthness into my own body and what I really needed to do and understand how everything connects behind the scenes. That for me was the number one thing that I wanted to get out of it. So I was more intentional when I started this, right? But it gets more complicated as we started. And, I'll tell you more about it later.
Yeah. So you came into the program, you had your what we call the gateway day, right?
Yep.
So that's where you get sort of a baseline set of diagnostics, some initial functional assessments, biomarkers. From your perspective, what was the biggest surprise you got out of that sort of foundational experience? So
on that, there were two things. One, the experience was great because essentially that day I was surrounded, by Will. I mean, the doctors, Nick, everybody on the team. So I felt that, okay, there's a lot of eyeballs and there's a lot of people with different expertise that are kind of help me walk through this. I was initially scared that there would be some deeper things, cancer or anything like that, that it could be found. But that is something that you got to overcome that fear, right? Otherwise, if you wait later, it's going to be much worse. And then the second piece that took me by surprise is when we did the physical testing, VO2 max, the strength training, all those exercises that we do, especially when I thought that, I exercise, I should be in a better place. And I wasn't. And that for me was a good eye opener. And then the other eye opener was my lipid profile. I didn't expect it to be in the shape where it was. Yeah. Yeah. And we'll take a look at your biomarkers here in a minute. And I think it's useful to just actually see, right? I mean, part of the concept here is that we want to follow people over time longitudinally, see trajectories of change. So I think obviously that's always informative. And then, you also, I think, have expressed that you learned some lessons around metabolic state, right? So maybe you can take us through kind of what you experienced initially, and then we'll talk about, some of the guidance that was given and how that's had an impact on you. Yeah. I mean, as I was telling you at the beginning of our conversation, in at work, you look at data and you go deep into the numbers. You really try to ask different questions. I never did that with my own health, with my own numbers. And as I started looking, I look back at the results of 10 years ago when my A1C levels were already at 5.7. Although I had dropped all this weight, I was eating healthy, I was exercising. And I started realizing, hang on, but that's been 10 years. And then on top of it, being part of the program. And then the best part about all of this is that I got the entire team. I can text someone, I can call someone and realize, hey, this is what happened. So the number one thing is for me to gather enough data, right? So I'll get the CGM in place and then start logging in what you eat, what happened that day, and all those readings. So that takes a period of 60 to 90 days for you to really realize, okay, I'm gathering enough information that I might be able to get some key insights around what's happening with my own body. And the best part about what I love about the program and the intake is, okay, number one, give you an aura ring, right? Blood pressure that it connects with you guys, CGM readings that connects with the data and all the data points that you guys have, that automatically start just kind of not only me logging the data, but also for you guys to start looking at what's happening, right? What is behind this? What is changing? So that for me was one thing. The second portion is realize the complexity of what it takes to really bring it down.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a couple of things you said in the last few minutes that I think are worth double clicking on. One is what you said around, I think you experienced what a lot of people experience, some anxiety, a little bit of fear, when you do these comprehensive assessments. Particularly, you mentioned cancer. That's a big one, right? We do multi-cancer detection tests, but it could be around anything. It could be around percent body fat, right? But I think that feeling of fear that you're going to find something that you didn't want to know about, or maybe it's good to know, but it's something you didn't want to have be true. So that's important just to acknowledge. I think what you said is great. You have to acknowledge it. You have to get past it and recognize that information is power, but also know yourself. And, if the knowledge of something is going to create so much anxiety, working with the team to figure out, okay, maybe we won't measure that on you right away. Right?
Can I give you an example?
Yeah, absolutely. Please.
So every time I came over here, my blood pressure reading was through the roof.
Sure.
I was just really freaking out over that. And then what I realized is like, okay, hang on. It's all about data, right? So how about if I agree with Nikki and the team says, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to have the on-run reading. I'm going to test my blood pressure multiple times a week at different times, right after a stressful meeting at work, right after I have a bunch of caffeine, after workouts, as I'm waking up, as I'm going to bed. And at the end, I want to say over 78 readings over a 60-day period. And that's when we realized, actually, I don't have high blood pressure, thank goodness.
Yeah.
But that's when it actually takes, right?
Yeah. That's a great example. And lots of people, my wife experiences the same thing where her blood pressure goes up when she goes to the doctor. For whatever reason, mine doesn't. I'm maybe just super relaxed with the doctor or whatever, but I mean, it's common. Yeah. And I think there are a couple of things that are worth noting. One is, blood pressure, while some people would say, well, it's kind of a boring biomarker, also one of the most powerful biomarkers we have. But like any biomarker by itself, it's only one reading, right? That's susceptible to all sorts of variation. And so you need to know what that variation is and be able to put it in the context of a whole kind of systems of health approach, right? And so you were talking about, the cardiovascular system, the metabolic system, the cognitive system, musculoskeletal system, trying to get data across all of those systems and then understand how they interact. And so I think that interaction, again, from our conversations previously, in your case, you've got a really, I think, interesting case example when it comes to metabolic health about how multiple factors can interact to impact metabolic health. So maybe talk about what you've learned going through this process about how stress and sleep and what you eat and when you eat is all sort of working together to impact your personal metabolic state.
Yeah. When I first started the program, obviously the number one thing that you change is nutrition, right? So you try to add a lot more protein, obviously minimize carbs, starches, all of those pieces.
Yeah,
so
at least processed foods for sure,
processed
right?
Foods, right?
Yeah.
So the interesting thing is that, okay, I'm committed. I'm going to do this program. And I was very disciplined around all those elements of nutrition and also discipline around exercise. But then I started looking at my biometrics, especially CGM, and sometimes it was contradicting, right? The fact that sometimes I wake up, I look at my CGM monitor and realize, okay, look, it's 87. Great. Within 15 minutes, I'm getting up, I'm getting the kids ready, And all of a sudden I realized I'm at 110.
And you didn't eat anything.
Nothing.
Yeah.
So that was one thing that kind of started sticking with me, like why this is happening. Then the other portion is I have my Oura ring, which measures my quality of sleep every night, right? And then that's another thing I start connecting some of that association of, okay, my sleep, stress levels, what happened the night before, and also the nutrition, what also I ate the night before. And then for example, I do time-restricted eating. That's something
you were doing that before you came back.
Before, right? Mm-hmm. But what I learned is that because I don't like breakfast and I usually don't have anything in the morning, having the meals in the afternoon, early evening, or actually just influencing some of the glucose levels as well. So how I start just that kind of testing, if I start eating 1 hour before, will that change? So that was another insightful piece.
Yeah. And I want you to go on, but I also want to just make the comment there, this sort of personal experimentation piece and finding what works for you and using some of these tools to follow that is, I think, a big part of the journey, right? And just trying different things within the overall framework of a healthy lifestyle.
Yeah, because the beauty of it is that you're looking at the data, right? You're doing a lot of hypothesis, testing it, and see the outcome, right? And then the other portion is we're all on social media. We're all on all this information and, the promises. Take this supplement. This will have this. Anything is magic out there, right? Yeah. When in reality, it's a combination of multiple things. But the beauty of it is, for example, berberine is a supplement that I start taking before meals. And before I do anything, I just check with Nikki. Hey, Nikki, what do you suggest? And like, okay, let's test this out. Let's test it for 3 weeks, see how that goes. And that ability to reach out to some of the team members and realize, okay, we're going to test this out. Let's look at the outcomes. And then there was another situation where I started eating way too much fish and my mercury levels went through the roof. Yeah. Nikki called me the next day, like, hey, let's just
I'm really glad you brought that up because I think this is something where, certainly in typical primary care, very unlikely you're ever going to get your heavy metals measured in blood work. And I think I've said this on the podcast before, it's not super common, but you're not the only person. Like it's statistically significant fraction of our clients where we find higher levels of mercury in particular, usually because of fish. A lot of people in the Pacific Northwest like sushi. So it's a real thing, right? And the only way you're going to know is if you actually measure it. And so I think that this is that's a biomarker, these toxic metals. You probably don't need to measure it every 3 months. You could if you want to, no downside other than cost, but you kind of want to know if you're reaching toxic thresholds for mercury or other heavy metals. So I'm glad you mentioned that specifically. And so the fix there for you probably was pretty easy, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then you talk to Will, he talks all about nutrition. Like, okay, why don't we replace this with that? Yeah. And then very quickly, we're able to just switch things around, the next biometrics, everything back to normal. Yeah. So once again, it's just really reading through the numbers and then testing it out.
So what have you done specifically around stress? Because it sounded like for you, that was a big trigger. You noted you were able to identify early on. What have been some of the strategies you've employed? So
I've incorporated 3 major things. One is the ability to, in the middle of my day, I have a dog, and if I'm not I'm home, working from home, I'm at an office, and my idea is I need to get out. I need to go out and walk. Usually, if I do it right after lunch, that's the best time of my day. The other piece that I do is in the morning and in the evening when I arrive home, is better meditation. Just literally 5-10 minutes. I sit around. It's just more around the breathing. And I've also noticed, although my blood pressure readings were never high, as now we came to learn after that, these really, really help even bringing the blood pressure down. So it is just literally 2 times a day, 5-10 minutes. And it was more relaxing, right? So when you come home, you're going to see the kids and everybody at home, just having that moment for yourself where it's all about breathing and getting back. And also when you go back to the office after lunch or you're going back to the rest of your day in the meetings. So usually just walk in Lola for a little bit of activity and then a little bit of the meditation. Those 2 things really made a difference, and you can actually see on the results how they actually improve, right? Yeah. So like that's working. I need to do more of that. I need to keep that.
Yeah. So, I mean, it sounds like you've been quite intentional at taking steps to try to manage stress and based on the biomarkers, it seems to have been successful.
It's working.
So what we're going to do now is I'm going to pull up your profile within the health intelligence platform, and we can look through some of the biomarkers that I thought were most interesting. So first of all, actually, one question I wanted to ask you is, so you've made lifestyle changes. Did you start any medications since you were in the program?
The only thing that we've added is statin.
A statin
That's
for
the only
lipids.
thing that...
Okay. Because interpreting the biomarker changes, I think sometimes it's useful to understand how much of this is due to lifestyle, how much of it is due potentially to a medication. I think many people, and I generally align with this, are of the opinion that, you start with lifestyle, you do the best you can. Yes. And for a lot of people, myself included, that's not enough. And then you add on appropriately medications to bring your biomarkers into the optimal range.
That's kind of how the journey went, because I was part of the program already for about 10 months before I jump into the statin. And we started at a very small level. I'm still at a very small level, 10 milligrams, but that's how it went.
Yeah. Okay, great. So let's look at body composition first. So first of all, you've had sort of an amazing transformation in body composition. Good job.
Lucky.
So we've got DEXAs between, May of 2024. Yes. And the end of 2025. So it looks like 2-3 months ago was your last DEXA. Correct. So the big one here, visceral adipose going from 3.4 pounds to less than a pound.
That's powerful.
That's great. And I mean, visceral adipose is driving a lot of the metabolic dysfunction and inflammatory response. And then total body fat at the same time went from 29.7% to 20.2%. So pretty significant drop in body fat.
And we ended up at 20.24%, 20.1% on November.
Right. Yeah. So that's a nice drop in total body fat and visceral adipose. A loss of 7 pounds in body fat. So you got 7 pounds of fat off of you. At the same time, though, you were able to gain almost 2 pounds of lean mass. So that's the kind of transformation we're looking for, right? Mm-hmm. Where you don't lose both. No. You are able to actually have a little bit of a shift. So this is all going the right direction. This is fantastic. What, if any, I mean, what's your goal from here? Do you feel like you want to kind of maintain this, or do you have additional goals that you want to?
I think the number one thing that I learned, especially from my previous program that I was telling you about 10 years ago, right? Where you drop a lot of weight, but then my visceral fat was still high.
Yeah, that's so right.
What happened there, right? And then the other part that we all know is that, look, I'm 53 years old. We know that at a certain point in time, adding muscle, it becomes a much tougher situation, right? So since I started the program, I've been very intentional around two things: nutrition, adding a lot more protein, and then good proteins as well. And then the second portion, strength training, right?
Yes.
So that has been kind of my main focus around the journey.
And have you changed your strength training routine?
As well, yeah. So I've been able to incorporate, especially I had a shoulder injury, so I had to just kind of diverse from different things. But the main focus for me was main muscles, and then the ability to do pull-ups and a lot of just strength training in a way that it is more practical, rather than just thinking that I'm going to be growing all these muscles, but rather about what I need, right, on my lifestyle. So that has been the two main things: the amount of protein, the intake that I've done, and then the strength training and the programs that I've been following.
And in terms of your strength training, did you work with a personal trainer, or have you sort of done that on your own?
I'm lucky because Nick, our office,
you've got a personal trainer who can help you.
He's been guiding me through a lot of this thing, and so thanks to that, I've been able to really. That's one of the areas that I probably improved the most. In the last 18 months.
Mm-hmm. Great. So anyways, this is one of the reasons why I really like DEXA as a readout, because you can really see over 12, 18 months, the trajectory that somebody's on in terms of their body composition. And as we've discussed, it's all interconnected with metabolic health and physical strength and even cognitive function. Mm-hmm. So we'll look at the blood work now, but I think body composition is a good starting point, a good place to start. Yeah. So you mentioned lipids, and this is one of the things that jumped out. So when you came in, your ApoB was suboptimal, between 110 and 120 in your first, looks like 6 months or 3 months in the program. The most recent reading in November was 70. That's a pretty big drop. And at the same time, your LDL went from 160 and now is down at 74. So again, that's a pretty remarkable change in your lipid profile. HDL has been flat the entire time, so it hasn't changed. Again, and you said you started the statin after being in the program for about 6 months.
8 months into it.
Okay.
Yes.
And that looks like about the time frame looking at the longitudinal measurements where you started to see the real significant drops in the ApoB and the LDL.
Correct. That no doubt the statin has really helped.
Yeah.
But then the other portion that I think I want to associate, especially the last results, is the management of my glucose levels. I think that is one piece that I can definitely see that help on the output on the ApoB. And
so we'll go to the metabolic system next. Here. So A1C was hovering around 5.8. Early on, most recently down to 5.5. So, directionally great. I would say still room for improvement. So this is part of the process, right? And again, I think you have alluded to this already, but it's not an overnight fix, right? This is a trajectory that you want to be on going forward. But certainly going the right direction.
And let me tell you what, look, if you actually look at the results, right, everything was looking good. And then I came back in June, and then all of a sudden my A1C was still 5.8 and I've made some changes. That's when I decided, okay, I'm going to do a deep dive into this. And understanding a lot of the pieces that were influenced the glucose levels, that's when I really start moving the needle. Right. So that for me was an eye-opener around where I'm at and where I need to be and what influence all those outputs.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, this is also, I think, interesting because, we talk about fasting glucose as, that's the metric that most people are going to get when they go see their primary care physician. In your case, it's not really tracking with the A1C perfectly, right? So again, you want to have multiple measurements altogether. Even if your fasting glucose may not be exactly where we want it yet, your A1C is going down, your visceral fat is going down. We can tell by CGM your metabolic homeostasis has improved. So this one biomarker, while it's data, is not informative of the whole picture.
Beauty of that is that 103 that you show over there that morning, and because I was wearing the CGM, I was able to show exactly that what my readings are every morning. Yeah. That morning was 84. But by the time I got to here, obviously, cortisol, who knows those levels. So all those pieces, it helps you worry or it helps you minimize that
That's
worry.
Right. I think that's really important. And, I have the same phenomenon that you do, which is it's called dawn effect, and many people do. And so you're sleeping and your glucose is in the 70s and 80s. Either right before you wake up or right after you wake up, you have this spike, but it stays up. And so mine would go up to 104. So every time I got a fasting glucose measurement, it was like 104. And the doctor's like, you're almost to pre-diabetes. You're not there yet. Why don't you pay attention to your diet or something? Not enough to put me on a medication, but
what's going on?
Right. My A1C was always like 5.5, 5.4,
nothing to worry
5.3. I mean, it's still not optimal, right? So anyway, so I'm now taking an SGLT2 inhibitor, and my fasting glucose, I don't really have that dawn effect anymore.
Oh, really?
My fasting glucose has typically now been in the 90s or the high 80s. And my A1C is down, 0.3, 0.4 points. So again, I'm not suggesting an SGLT2 inhibitor for you, although we can talk about that, or for everybody. But for me, it has gotten my biomarkers into what I was considering the optimal range. And so I think it's a good sort of proactive approach. And my diet's pretty clean. So I did what I could around lifestyle, and then I took this step.
Nikki, exactly in our last meeting, she discussed the possibility for us to explore that possibility, and I'm completely open for it. I think it's the right thing. This is another piece that I've learned, right? Before, I was really, I was against any type of medication. Like, I'm too young to be already in medications. Yeah. What am I doing, right? Now I'm in the opposite side, as long as the numbers and everything validates, right? You don't want to be overtaking a bunch of medication that you may not
or
need.
Supplements,
or supplements that create more, damage on your liver and things like that. But there's certain medications that really improve your lifestyle and your biometrics in such a way that it is a no-brainer to do it.
Yeah. I think I'm glad you said that, because I've said those kinds of things before, but it's useful to hear it from other people, right? And I think one of the differences is, at least this is the way I think about it. You can wait to take a medication till you get diagnosed with a disease. I would much rather take an appropriate medication to keep me from getting that disease and having the pathology develop. So that's the way I think about the SGLT2 inhibitors 100%. For me. That's the same reason. So you're taking a statin. I'm on a PCSK9 inhibitor, Repatha, which has brought my ApoB down from, close to where yours was, 110, 50 on the last measurement. So anyways, I think the proactive use of a small number of medications, like that's about it for what I'm taking other than testosterone, those 3 medications. But I think all of those are being used in a way that improves certainly biomarkers and quality of life, and hopefully will keep me from moving into diabetes or moving into heart disease.
And demystifying, right? So every time you associate someone taking blood pressure medication, cholesterol medication, you associate a person that is not healthy, that it needs medication to be healthy. Quite the opposite. If you look at it from the different lens, in a sense that actually to prevent that, to be healthier.
It's a tool in the toolkit.
Why not use it?
Yeah. Okay. Right? Great. So I think we've hammered this point, but it's really important. So glucose is looking good. Your HOMA-IR, which is insulin sensitivity, is again, kind of bouncing around. This is something we want to pay attention to. Insulin sensitivity is really important measure of overall metabolic health. Let's take a look at your environment. So we have all these categories on the health intelligence platform because you talked about the Mercury, and sure enough, we can see right here, you started at 2.4. Then in September, you were at 7.2. And then in June, you were at 16. And then by November, you're back down to 2. So again, you wouldn't have known if we hadn't measured. If your Mercury kept going up, you might be having some neurological symptoms by now, but we were able to find it. An easy fix.
And Nikki called me the next day, like, hey, let's change the diet. Will told me, okay, let's change these 2 things. It was just a small changes. I was just eating a lot of the big fishes.
So again, I think just a great case example of how biomarker assessments can catch something that you wouldn't have known about otherwise. So this has been great. Why don't we talk about what your goals are for the future now? So you're on a better trajectory. You've learned some things. What are you hoping to see going forward?
Yeah. So look, what this journey has taught me is that one, this is a lot more complex than people think, right? We are in a world that everything is take a pill, do something, is fixed, do this program 3 days, we'll fix it. And what is definitely true is that this is a journey. And the journey is about learning your own engine, right? Because for somebody, their A1C could actually drop by doing X, Y, and Z. For me, it does not.
Yeah.
It did not.
Yeah.
So what I've learned the most is to listen to my own body based on key data. And then from then, be able to do small changes and measure it and see what's changed, right? So that's been the journey so far. Now, the next piece is that obviously all of this needs to be sustainable. Right? The idea is I want to live a long life and healthy one.
That's right.
Right?
Yep.
So it's not that I'm going to do this for 2 months and that's it. And then in 6 months, I got to do it again. But rather about what did I find enjoyable? Why did I find things that I can actually incorporate in my daily routine? Because obviously it moved the needle on the biometrics, but also that I feel that it really helped me. For instance, 2 things. One, the meditation process, just literally just 5 to 10 minutes twice a day. And then the other portion is around clarity, mental clarity. So I realized that by aligning a little bit more my nutrition and then having these moments of being outside and just having time for myself really help for my mental clarity. So on business meetings, I'm able to be a bit sharper and then just be more present. The afternoons didn't have a crash at all. My amount of energy. And by default, the quality of my relationships have improved, right? So there's key nuggets that I've learned along the journey that I realized, okay, I'm going to incorporate a lot of these pieces, right? But also, you cannot be over optimistic, because if you want to do all of this and that and the other, none of that will take place, or it becomes a burden rather than part of your rituals. So things that I'm consistently doing, obviously the workout, cardio, and then strength training. That's something that is consistent. The meditation, and then being outside. And, we live in the Pacific Northwest. It rains all the time. You just put another gear and you get out, and you just feeling that is makes a big difference. So those are pieces that I'm doing. Now, what I'm looking into the future, obviously, there's a lot more work to be done, right? On my A1C levels, and further kind of realigning my nutrition. I'm also curious to see what else could I be doing to gain a little bit more muscle, right? Or for that matter, also retain what I have as well. So I'm going to be mixing a little bit more on my strength training routine. So little things, but for now, I feel that I picked up some things along the way that at least will carry this for a long time, because I see the benefit of it.
So, I mean, let me ask you a question. Optispan goes away, right? You don't have Nikki and Will and Nick. Let's just say that it's not going to. Let's just say that happens. Do you feel like your approach today is sustainable for you?
Yes and no. Yes, absolutely, in the way that I know my body in so many ways in a much better function than I did before, right? For instance, going to meet up with some colleagues, we're going for happy hour. I could order a beer, or I could order something else. Yeah. I know that a beer, especially a hazy IPA, is going to raise my glucose levels very quickly, and it's going to be out there for a while. So what I'm going to go for is, I'm going to have bourbon, right? Bourbon, as a matter of fact, it actually brings my glucose down a little bit. But everything comes with a price, right? If I'm going to have one or two drinks, that means my heart rate for that evening on my HRV would be lower. So there's different trades that you do, and it's okay.
Yeah,
it's
but now, right? Yes. I mean, I think this is common, but I'm sure you had this experience. Everybody who uses a sleep tracker like an Oura Ring learns the effect of alcohol on HRV and sleep quality. So at least you're making that decision knowing what the trade-off is.
And it's okay. It's not that I'm a monk right. and I'm not going to enjoy my moments. Yeah. Absolutely. But if I'm going to get to that place, I know what to pick because I know what it would be better for my body.
Yeah.
Right?
And you're probably going to think twice about having alcohol every night as opposed to once in a while with friends. Yeah.
Exactly. And make it worth it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Okay. Do you want to see something? I don't think you've seen this yet because we recently just put this in the platform. It's called Lineage. You know what Lineage is?
No.
Okay. I'm sure you've heard of biological age clocks. Most of them, at least in the consumer space and the clinical space, are garbage. They don't work. You can't use them. They're not statistically defensible. End of story. So Lineage, or Lineage 2 precisely, is really the only, in my opinion, clinically useful biological age clock. And it's useful because it is built off of clinical chemistry markers. So many of the same things we're already measuring, as well as some information about your health history and lifestyle. So we've got the Lineage calculator now working within the health intelligence platform. I don't know how you're going to feel about this. So your Lineage, when you came into the program, was 54.
Yes.
And again, maybe it's worth talking about what this is actually measuring. This is not a true measurement of biological age. This is an estimate of your mortality risk over the next 10 years.
Got it.
And what's done is, whatever that mortality risk is, it is then back calculated to the age equivalent. So in other words, your Lineage, when you came into the program 18 months ago or so, was 54. That was the Lineage at the time. That means that at that point, based on the parameters that are being measured, your risk of dying is that of a 54-year-old.
Got it.
Basically.
Yeah. So it's
now, today, and at that point, your chronological age was 52.
Exactly.
Right? Now, today, your Lineage is 52.1, but your chronological age is 53. So you went from having the mortality risk of someone 2 years older than you to now having the mortality risk of someone 1 year lower than you, based on this algorithm. So you may look at this and be like 53 versus 52, so what, right? One of the reasons I like Lineage, though, is unlike some of these other quote unquote biological aging clocks, is it gives a realistic estimation. The fact that you have gone from the mortality risk of a 54-year-old to that of a 52-year-old, even though you've aged in a year, is a big deal. So good job. And the other nice feature of this is we can tell which of the specific features are driving that mortality risk and bring it down. And so Nikki will talk to you more about what we're thinking about based on this, but the types of features that are used include many of the blood chemistry markers we've already talked about, insulin levels and ApoB and things like that. So this is kind of a neat new tool. I like it. And it's really nice when we see directional changes that match up with the other biomarkers we're using, like body composition and lipid levels and metabolic markers. So for you, everything's going the right direction, man.
Absolutely.
It's like,
let me tell you one thing is refreshing. Look, one thing that people need to understand about health and this specific program is it's not about a miracle that you're going to bring it down from X to Y. It's the trend, right? And I'm only 18 months into the program and the trend is looking that way.
And the knowledge you've gained, right? I mean, I think that's the other piece. Like just this is part of being able to really be your own best health advocate is you need that knowledge base because, you know, I can tell you, people can listen to the podcast, Nikki can tell you, but unless you actually internalize that and adopt it and make it part of your life, it's not going to have the long-term sustainability. So
100%.
So, I mean, again, thank you for coming on. I really enjoy talking to you and other people like you because what I see is that you have made this a part of your life. And that's why I asked the question about whether you think this is sustainable, because I think it is for you. I hope it is, but I think it is. And I think the way you talk, the way you act, you've made these habits. And so, you know, even if this program wasn't here, I think you would probably keep going on the trajectory that you're on. Maybe not, maybe you wouldn't have the same improvements going forward, but
that's the thing.
You're on a better trajectory than you were 18 months ago. And that's great.
No. And one more thing is that no doubt that I would now have the knowledge and the insights to kind of continue that trajectory. But then the other piece is there's many other things that are coming out and you guys are in that cutting edge, right? From, you know, different drugs or rapamycin, all these new things that are coming out.
Which, by the way, you're not taking rapamycin.
No, not yet.
Right. So I know for people who think that like, oh yeah, Matt's just handing out rapamycin. No. We don't do that.
No. In fact, that hasn't even been offered. But those are the main things that I want to be part of this journey, right? This is just the beginning of this future. So if anything, I think it's just going to get better for me.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on. And I look forward to continuing this journey with you into the future.
Thank you so much, Matt. Appreciate you.